Welcome to this interview on the Speedometer. My name's Matt Speed, and today we'll be talking all about the band Drella. They're a Bradford band making alt rock protest songs with a real fire in their belly. And their new track Guillotine is out on the 22nd of March. And the good news for you is that Jonny from the band joins me now. It's a pleasure to have you on. How are we doing, Jonny?
Hi, Matt. Yeah, really good. Thank you. Thanks so much for having us on. Really
It's
appreciate it.
It is my pleasure, and we'll get on to talk about the new single in a little while. But I figured for those listeners that maybe haven't heard of Drella before, we'll take it back to the beginning. You've been releasing music for the past couple of years. Debut EP Silence, obviously released in 2023. But I wanted to know kind of how did the band come about, and where did you start from?
Yeah. There's three of us in the band. Myself, Johnny, Toby is our bass player, and Alfie is our drummer. We've actually been friends a long time. We met sort of first. So I met Toby second day of year seven, and then Alfie was sort of like a month later or so. So we've been friends about 15 years now. And then when we were at school, we tried to put bands together, but it was always just sort of kids with guitars making a lot of noise in a practice room. It never really materialized into anything like actually that could actually go anywhere, I suppose. And then we all kind of went our separate ways when we got to sort of 18, 19. So me and Toby went off to uni, different cities, kind of stopped talking for a few years, really. And then when we all came back to Bradford after going to uni, we kind of had. So I started jamming with Alfie again. He was playing drums at the time, so I just kind of went up to his house and we played a few songs. And it was the first time we'd kind of written anything that we thought, oh, this could actually kind of go somewhere. And then we were looking to try and get a few more people on board. So the first kind of name on that list was to contact Toby again. So I hadn't spoke to him in about 4 years, and then we sent him a message. He was interested, so he came back on, started playing bass for us, and then sort of took it from there, really. But I suppose that was about a year before COVID started, so you kind of start moving forward. You get really excited, you get a few songs written, you think this is great, we're gonna really go far with this. And then 2 years worth of lockdown, and all of a sudden we were sort of almost back at square one. But yeah, and then after COVID, we kind of had a sit down, thought we need to kind of shake this up a little bit and do something after COVID that I suppose we can be proud of, have a bit of a last roll of the dice, I suppose, at it.
Hmm.
And that's when Drella was born. And since then, we've kind of, just been really pushing on with it, really. It's the first project we've all had together, and the first project I think any of us have had that we're really quite proud of. And willing to put the amount of energy and time into it that is probably demanded of being a band or an artist in
Yeah.
today's musical landscape, I suppose.
Yeah. And it's pretty obvious that you guys obviously have that bond, obviously being friends to begin with, and then going
Mm.
back, and then music kind of uniting you all. But when did you kind of discover the identity of Drella as a kind of a political punk band?
Yeah, that's a kind of, I suppose, from a musical sense, is fairly recent, sort of within the last maybe 2 years or so. Myself, I think all of us have been, even when we were growing up, we were sort of indirectly interested in politics a little bit. I think Alfie was the first person I knew who really liked punk, the classic punk music from the 80s, so the Clash and the Sex Pistols and all that sort of stuff. So he was listening to that before I kind of liked it at all, really. And then at uni, I kind of fell into the political crowd at uni. So I mean, my uni time was sort of, there were a lot of like teacher protests when I was at uni. So it kind of opened up that world of real sort of activist politics to me when I was at uni. And I'd never kind of been involved in it at all when I was living in Bradford. But then when I was at uni, I was kind of going to protest about supporting, like the teachers' pension strikes when that was on. So that was 2018, I think.
Right.
And at the same year, when I was in Manchester, there was a lot of protests about what our kind of student payments were going towards, what they were funding within the university. So that was my first experience of doing actual activism.
Mm.
And then when we came back and actually formed the band, it took a while for that to get into the band. I think I was sort of the indirect opinion at the time that those two worlds couldn't fuse, or at least they'd sort of struggle to fuse, or maybe they fused in like hip hop and grime, but not so much in rock music anymore, really.
Yeah.
And maybe we weren't angry enough or weren't political enough to actually do that with our band. And then we wrote a couple of songs that were not political at all. And then I think once we'd written them and got those out the way, we kind of had a what next moment. And then
Mm,
that was when Alfie actually came with a couple of like guitar riffs and bass bits, and we sort of decided to experiment doing very politically driven lyrics with those. And I think we just
mm.
enjoyed it so much more, fusing those two worlds and doing music that's, I suppose, intentionally a little bit angry and a little bit confrontational in some regards. It felt for us much more of a exciting world to be a part of and much more of a fit for our kind of personalities and our musical styles, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you think being from Bradford and maybe also being from kind of the north of England as a region, lends itself to being a political band? Obviously Bradford, I know this because I'm from the area as well, is the only major city in the UK not to be on a major train line, and
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
that was that's been seen by a lot of people in the area to be like an example of southern bias.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, of course.
how do you feel about that? Do you think it lends its, do you think it's natural for, or more natural perhaps for you guys as a band from Bradford to be a politically active band?
I think so. Yeah. I think we're all three of us were very proud of our background being from Bradford. And I think when we first started doing music in Bradford, we were quite taken aback by just how many, really talented individuals there are living in Bradford. People who are, really proud of Bradford and really want to see it do well. I suppose growing up in Bradford as well, there's a couple of streets now in Bradford where you walk down them and it's just derelict buildings and boarded up shops and things like that. So Bradford sort of feels like a place that's full of really wonderful, hardworking, talented people, but then isn't perhaps getting the recognition, I suppose, financially and culturally it deserves until I suppose recently with the City of Culture bid that's come
Mm,
in, which is I suppose a collection of all Bradford's different cultural backgrounds, which is really rich and really diverse. It's not just about punk music, and it's not just about, I suppose, all the other musical genres that are there. It's about everything that makes Bradford the place that it is.
yeah,
Um, but having said that, I mean, Bradford's not always been an easy place to live and grow up. There's a lot, like you say, it's not on a major train line. The transport infrastructure is not great, and I suppose a lot of it comes down to those, like you say, the southern bias, the inequalities in funding and inequalities in opportunities. And I think it's not fair for the people of Bradford that are, that really deserve a lot more than what they're being given by the government and the people who allocate those funds. So yeah, I think so. I think growing up, you see the potential that Bradford has to be this incredible city, and then you see people continually allocating funds elsewhere, and you
yeah,
sort of think, look at what we could build, what we could be in Bradford, and it does make you angry because you think it could be, it's full of wonderful people and wonderful opportunities that
yeah.
people could have here, and it's just sort of continually been left out of those conversations about funding allocations. So yeah, definitely.
Do you think it gives you a bit of an underdog mentality though, and maybe perhaps a bit more of a, uh, I don't know if this is a negative phrase, but like a chip on your shoulder of kind of wanting to make it,
Hmm.
wanting to make your voices heard more.
Yeah, I think so. I think within the music scene, I suppose in Bradford there is that, because there's, when you look at, say, Manchester and all the kind of focus that has on its music scene, and then you look at maybe London as well. And I think when people think about music in the UK, you automatically default to certain cities, and Manchester's one of them. London's obviously one of them.
Right.
When really every city, and particularly I suppose northern cities, for the the reasons you were just saying there, all have very distinct musical identities, I suppose. And even Bradford, musical history in Bradford is really interesting, and
Yeah.
it's like you say, it's got such a rich tapestry of people that are working hard to make Bradford brilliant, I suppose.
Yeah.
um yeah, definitely. I think when you look at those cities and Manchester, you see some of the bands coming out of Manchester, and you think, there are people in Bradford doing music that's as good, and if not better than those places, but
Mm.
it's doesn't, like you say, it doesn't always get the recognition it deserves. But yeah, I think that's certainly led into our music, that almost. And I think the people we spoke to in Bradford, you know, I suppose Bradford's musical scene as well. There's a band called Wolf
Yeah.
Fauna, Shakes, and Mezcal, all sorts of bands that we talked to from time to time. And there's this real um sort of decisive mentality that we need to work together to make, you know, shout louder than everyone else and make Bradford, I suppose, a scene that people on the outside, you know, people in Leeds and people in Sheffield and Manchester look at Bradford and think, wow, you know, there's something going on there. we
Yeah.
we want to be part of that rather than it being the other way around, rather than people from Bradford wanting to go elsewhere, you know.
Hmm. Well, I think you're making a very good advert for Bradford music, with the new with the new single, which I guess we should probably talk about. Um, so it's called Guillotine.
Mhm.
And I guess the conversation we've just had kind of leads into this, but what directly inspired this track? There's a lot of political sort of themes in it, and I know that you've talked about in kind of like other press releases and stuff about how it's messages to politicians and stuff. But yeah, I guess from your perspective, what's this track about?
Yeah, so I think with yeah, this is one of those tracks, to be honest. I think if anyone listening has ever written music, or indeed yourself, Matt, ever written any lyrics or anything, you write some lyrics and you think, oh, that's definitely gonna, you know, be on a track that we take into the studio, and then you write other ones and you think, oh, there's some in there, but I'll leave that till later. You know, there's
Yeah.
and Guillotine, I suppose, when it was actually first written, we'd already written a couple of I suppose political songs, like I suppose Divide was one of the first ones that we wrote and released. And I think sometimes with that one, I think some of the lyrics in it, despite being quite political, were almost indirect. Like it was almost seeing what problems, you know, are in society, but not really pointing the finger at anyone who can, you know, cause meaningful change. Whereas I think Guillotine is the other side of that, where a lot of the lyrics in Guillotine are quite intensely, like, or intentionally rather, confrontational towards certain people, you know, mainly, I suppose, politicians.
Mm,
It's really pointing the finger at people who can cause change in society and it's sort of choosing not to, or
mm,
choosing to prioritize certain issues over other issues or certain places over other places. But having said that as well, what we tried to do with Guillotine was rather than kind of writing the same song over and over again, because I think you can fall into the trap with that if you've got a very distinct musical identity that you want to, you know, you want to keep that going, you can sort of be like, that song did well, let's do a variation of that song. And I think that's
mm.
not always a great thing to kind of do, because you end up almost with, you know, the same song with four different chord progressions
Yeah.
just done over. So I think with Guillotine, what we tried to do with it was go, like you're saying, make it really confrontational, really point the finger at people, but also make it, I suppose, we try to make it quite funny and a bit
Mm,
witty, and, you know, almost have a little bit of a joke with some of these lyrics, that they are tackling quite serious issues that, you know, are underpinning them, but we're trying to do it in a little bit of a humorous way, because
yeah.
I suppose it's the classic saying, if you know, if you don't laugh about it, you'll cry about it, I suppose. uh,
Yeah.
but I suppose, you know, in on that sense, you know, punk music and protest music, it doesn't always have to be, you know, serious. And some of the most effective punk songs are those ones that make people chuckle and, you know,
Yeah.
make people look at things in a different way.
Well, we think of the band that we can't say on the radio that have been knocking on the door of the Christmas number one in recent years.
Oh yeah.
Definitely, you can. I think humor is part of punk music. It's
Mm,
in even from like even from an aesthetic standpoint. You look at kind of 70s punk bands with their loudness. There's a sense of not taking yourself too seriously, even if the message is quite serious, and
yeah.
a guillotine being a pretty good example of
Yeah.
a fairly no nonsense image there. Um,
Yeah.
I guess sonically also it's absolutely full pelt. Like there's this galloping guitar riff and like booming heaviness. Um, there's a moment towards the back end of the song where I was thinking this sounds a little bit like Rage Against the Machine. But I guess yeah, from your perspective, what influenced the sound of the track? Do you have
Yeah.
certain artists that you take like inspiration from?
I do, yeah. I suppose we can break this up into, there's different artists that I look to for lyrics inspirations, and then for guitar, because I did all the guitar work on that song. Rage Against the Machine, definitely one of them. So Tom Morello's guitar style, particularly with, I think the bit you're probably referencing is we have a bit of a breakdown with it uses like a whammy pedal, which is putting 2 octaves above the actual guitar, so it's really screechy. And Tom Morello
It's
was
very
like,
cool.
yeah, I'm glad you think so. But yeah, I mean that's definitely ripped out of Tom Morello's like cheat sheet, I suppose, is using that pedal for that kind of style of music. Because I mean, I remember when I first got that pedal and I had no idea how to use it, and then listening to Tom Morello's, particularly the way he does stuff is, it's that's really kind of driven that type of music. I suppose another person is Jack White. I love the way Jack White does stuff, and I think the White Stripes in general, just the simplicity of having, particularly on their earlier albums, just the drums and the guitar, and then how I suppose Jack White made, he had that talent of making one riff just go over and over in your head. Seven Nation Army being
Yeah.
he did so much with so little, and then even on the later albums, just using guitar effects pedals to bring out that, bulk out that sound and make it kind of interesting was so inspiring. And I think as well, musically, Nova Twins at the moment, I quite,
Mm.
I think what they're doing, and particularly their guitar player, the how they've managed to kind of build another aspect into, guitar music. I think that's
Mm.
it's artists like Nova Twins, I think at the moment, which are really kind of driving guitar music forward. You always think with guitar music it can be a bit, one dimensional sometimes. And I mean, I'm guilty of that, just writing a song with 3 or 4 chords or whatever.
Yeah.
And you hear a band that really does something different with it, and you think, wow, that's a completely new way of looking at guitar music.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sonic
It's hard to innovate though, isn't it?
is definitely, but I think that's why the guitar's lasted as long as it has as an
Mm.
instrument of popular music, I suppose, because people keep finding new ways to play it. And
For
I'd love
sure.
to be one of those people. That's what I sort of aspire to do, is to play the guitar in a way where people like, I didn't know you could play it like that.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
say Nova Twins, Jack White, Tom Morello are people that have definitely done that for me
Mm.
anyway.
It's
I
cool. It's
think
cool that you're taking influence from not only like the classic like behemoths of
yeah.
sort of
Mm.
noughties and 90s rock, but also like kind of contemporaries as well,
Yeah.
in Nova Twins as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite lyric or kind of maybe a lyric that you feel it kind of takes everything in the song and maybe is that lyric you were saying has to be in the track? Is there one that you think what am I trying to think? What word am I trying to think of? Um
The centerpiece of the song, I suppose. Yeah,
encapsulates.
encapsulates the
Yeah.
whole message of the song.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think so. I think possibly the second verse after the chorus. So that's I suppose the last line of that is in your Sunday best you will sell the NHS, then blame it on the poor in a government report. I think that probably is the one that probably encapsulates what that song is about, really, because you've got your sort of, I think the message is quite direct there, blame it on the poor in a government report. That,
Mm.
I mean, I don't know how many government reports have been over the years that have said, people abusing the welfare system and people overusing the NHS is what's, the cause of the problem, when really that's not, it's not true. These reports are kind of blaming the wrong people.
Mm.
I think the bit before that, in your Sunday best, you will sell the NHS. It's about, having the people that are supposed causing most damage in society are those that are in parliament with a suit and tie on,
Yeah.
people that are
Yeah.
dressing up nice and smart every morning, and then they're going in and they're causing, they're cutting welfare, they're causing public services to be strained. And yeah, so I think that lyric I would say is the one that encapsulates it all. It's got the witty kind of bits, slightly humorous,
Yeah.
and has the real direct message, and kind of what I said before as well, pointing the finger at people who can cause change, and
You're
holding their
settling the
guns.
score. You're
Yeah,
settling the
exactly.
score.
Yeah,
That's it.
they've had their say. We should have ours now, and
Absolutely, absolutely. Have you had a chance to play the track live yet? And if so, how did it go down? I know that there's a gig planned for
yeah,
just after the single release, which I guess we'll talk about in more detail in a little
yeah.
bit.
So most of the songs we do, most of them I'll say, we play live for quite a while before we get them in the studio, and I think I suppose we do that for a few reasons. You know, it helps you gauge which songs are your popular songs. It helps you hear it in a different environment and think, how is it going to stack up compared to the other songs? For a long time, Guillotine was the song that we actually opened with. So it kind of had the effect. I suppose it was different on different people, like if in and different, environments, depending on whether you were headlining a gig or supporting a gig. I think that riff at the beginning is always it's a bit of an ear catcher, when people, the music, whatever music, the background music playing goes off, and then instantly the screechy guitar comes out and
Mm.
the riff comes in. It always brings people in. We played a gig when we did live at Leeds last year. We played it's called Cellar Bar in Leeds, and that was kind of an interesting place because it was it's got like little tables around with candles on and stuff.
Right.
So I think the people who'd played before it was like a sort of experimental jazz quartet, and then we we came on and instantly played Guillotine, and it was sort of that very marked, distinct one kind of genre of music has ended. Here comes
Yeah.
the punks almost.
Not
So
not quite not quite sitting down music, is it?
no, perhaps not. No. So yeah, it's always been one of those songs that it's comfortable to play live first because it's one that it gets people. It just kind of just shows what you're about, and it gets anyone who's kind of still talking and not paying attention. That sort of gives them that slap around the face and says, look at us, we're on now. This is our
Gets
30
people
minutes
going.
to say something. So
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Um, what's the number one thing you want someone to take away from a Drella gig?
good question. I think I don't want to be too cliche, but I think the phrase maybe kill them with kindness comes to mind on that because I think with punk music for a while there's almost I think maybe born in the roots of punk music, like you said, you look to let's say the maybe Sid Vicious is a good example. He cuts a very intimidating figure, probably not approachable, maybe a little bit hostile at times. And I think punk music now is the complete opposite of that. It's kind of settled down to the point where people know who when you're making this punk music, which is it is aggressive and it is confrontational, but it's pointing it at a certain place and at a certain group of people and everyone else who, when we play a gig in Bradford, most of the people that are going to come to that gig are from Bradford. We're all working class, we're all in it together. We're essentially all allies. So I want that room to be, I want it to be full of love and full of power and full of emotion. And any anger that is in that room, it's not going to be directed at, each other people within that room. It's going to be directed
Yeah.
to the people that are, in positions of power and abusing positions of power.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I want people to get away from a Drella gig and any Drella songs and any Drella art, I suppose, that comes out is that we, as working class people, as people who are, we're kind of struggling day to day, particularly under the cost of living crisis. We're all in this together. We should love and support each other, but we need to have that little hardened side, but point in the right place.
Yeah. It's like that if anyone's seen Star Wars, when the Death Star laser is powering up it's sort of there's multiple
Yeah.
beams that go towards
Mhm.
one. I guess that's
Yeah.
that's maybe what you're describing. Um
Yeah, I'd
ev-
say so. You have yeah, definitely.
Coming together to direct a message. I like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well with because we're obviously quite settled in our politics. We know where we are, who to support, who not to support. I think maybe sometimes if people come to our gigs and they feel that they're angry at something, but they don't quite know where is a constructive place to direct that anger. Or I like to think maybe we can help point them in the direction that it's not immigrants, it's not your neighbor, it's not a stranger on the street or the homeless or the teachers. It is people in positions of power in government who are creating a lot of problems that we're seeing in society. And I'd like to think we can help point people in the in a direction where if they've got any anger, if they've got any incentive to cause change, that we can kind of show them where is a good place to put that energy.
That's admirable. A guiding hand and a good night out as well.
Exactly, yeah. What more could you want, eh?
I completely agree. So going forward, what has Drella got planned for in 2024 and kind of both with the release of this single and then kind of beyond as well?
Yeah, so we've got with the release of the single, so that's out on the 22nd of March. The day after that, we're playing a gig at the Underground in Bradford, which is incidentally where we met for the first
It
time.
is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good little venue.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been sort of our spiritual home as musicians for, because that's where we played for those few months that we managed to play gigs before COVID. They were all at the Underground. It was our little kind of oasis, of in what is sometimes a hostile musical environment. You always had the Underground. You always had the people that were working there. You always knew they would support you and they'd do what's right for you. So Underground have been really good from us, for us, so since day one, since we first started performing as a band. So always love performing there. It's always such a supportive place to be.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and with it being hometown, it's always special to play in your hometown. It's, you look out and it's a sea of faces that some some you don't, but you've got that shared love and admiration for your city, and I like to think it's a bit of a celebration of that, is the
Mhm.
hometown gigs. So the rest
Absolutely.
of the year, so oops, sorry, go on.
No, no, go on.
I was going to
It's
say,
all
yeah,
right.
for the rest of the year, we don't have much over summer yet. I think we're going to just be taking a little bit of time out just to focus on other life things,
Yeah.
really. Some of the writing I think we've been doing is, it would probably benefit from a little bit of, a step back and, some fresh kind of ideas, really. So I think having a
Yeah.
couple of months off over summer will really help us nail down some of these songs that we've got in the works but haven't quite had the time to just put the sort of finishing touches on.
Hmm.
um, and then we were in the studio about 4 weeks ago recording the next new single, which I think does build on Guillotine. This one's really, I think yeah, with this one, we've really tried to be quite funny and amusing. So hopefully that comes off. So we should hopefully be getting the final mix of that over the next sort of few days. And then that will be released towards the back end of this year. And we're hoping to kind of align that with a general election at the end of the
Yeah.
year. We're hoping. So we'll see what happens there, because obviously that plan can move around a little bit. We don't know the dates of what's going to happen yet, but we know that if we get a song ready, we can be ready to drop it at a moment's notice. So we're
Got
going to
it there.
try and align, because I suppose that's, as activists, as musicians, that's a dropping a song, that's a protest song on the eve of a general election, it's almost it's a call to arms, a call to
Yeah.
action to just, rather than throwing music into the void, this is a song that pushes people to use your vote, to cause some change. So it's, yeah, so that's what's left in 2024 for us. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, it's exciting stuff, but
It is.
it's all yeah, we'll see what happens with it, really.
I like the idea of using music for a purpose. You've got that mission statement of
Mhm.
sort of trying to unify people and show them the right way, and then you, not necessarily using the music, but having that be in the zeitgeist at a moment where
Yeah.
basically being politically aware would be pretty useful. Is I like that idea a lot. So looking forward to that. Hopefully, the election happens sooner rather than later. Not because it'd just be good for the country, but also because we get new Drella.
Yellow, yeah.
That's it. If anyone that doesn't want an election now, then I don't know what could happen.
Yeah.
Don't know what else they need.
Convince them,
Uh,
yeah.
that's it. Well, one final question then, Johnny. We've got if you could play one show anywhere in the world, universe, or moment in time, where would it be?
Wow. That's a very, very good question. I'm glad you added the time on the back there, because I think my answer was going to be a bit cliched. Glastonbury would have been good and all that, but because you said we could go anywhere in time, I think probably Woodstock, the original Woodstock, 1969, would have been a place that, I remember learning about that in history and learning that why it was significant, why it was important, and then you still see photos to this day of people going to Woodstock and the spirit that must have been, what it must have been like, and the people that were there, and just I suppose the good feeling, but then doing
Mm,
that real direct, because that was Vietnam War protest, and
yeah.
that must have been such a, and I suppose at the height of I think you had the Cuban Missile Crisis around then. People didn't really know what was going to happen with the Cold War, with, bombs. Were
Yeah,
we going to get blown to smithereens next week? I don't know. So let's just have a party. Let's enjoy ourselves, but do it for a purpose.
yeah. There's a
Mm.
love and there's a community and there's a unity there, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And
In
everyone
spite of
fighting for
everything else.
one cause. And that one cause being, love for each other, but love for your planet as well, love for life in
Yeah,
general. And it must have been a scary time. And I think having that backdrop of all these awful events happening in the world and then getting together, on summer's weekend and just enjoying music and enjoying life. Yeah, that would have been, would have loved to have been a part of that.
that's a very good
Yeah.
answer. That's a very good answer and a great way to bring our conversation to a close. So thank you very much, Johnny, for all of your time. Best of luck with the release of Guillotine and everything else that
Thank you
you're up
so
to.
much, Matt. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
More than welcome. So, if you need reminding, Guillotine is out on the 22nd of the March, 22nd of March, and Drella play at the Underground in Bradford on the 23rd, and tickets are on sale now, so you can grab them. Thanks once more to Johnny, and I will see you later.